a copper-preserving pan sitting in a skip outside a house in Leeds in 1978, a telephone table with its own seat thrown out when the hall was modernised, a writing bureau that 3 generations of the same family had used to pay their bills, write their letters, and keep everything important, gone to a charity shop for £2 in 1986. Every one of them was in British homes in the 1960s. Every one of them was thrown away, and looking back now, every single one of them was brilliant. 12 things, starting with the one that sat in the hall of almost every house in Britain and told you everything you needed to know about a family before you had even walked through the door. Every hall had one. A tall wooden stand, usually oak or mahogany, with curved brass hooks at the top for hats and coats, a small shelf halfway down, and an umbrella stand at the base that was always full of umbrellas nobody had touched since the coronation. It stood by the front door and it held the things people actually used every day: your father's flat cap, your mother's shopping coat, the children's school scarves in winter. It was the first thing you saw when you came in and the last thing you touched when you went out. When fitted coat hooks screwed the wall became fashionable in the 70s, the hat stand went to the garage. A good Victorian or Edwardian hall stand in oak sells at auction today for between £300 and £800. The coat hooks cost £4 from the hardware shop. We chose the coat hooks, the writing bureau. Against the wall of the front room, or sometimes the bedroom, there was the writing bureau, a tall piece of furniture with a lid that folded down on a brass chain to become a writing surface. Inside, small pigeonholes for letters, a drawer for stamps, a slot for the paying in book, and usually one locked compartment where the things that were nobody else's business were kept. 3 generations of the same family used the same bureau, bills paid at it, letters written at it, homework done at it, when the kitchen table was being used for something else. When people got more casual about correspondence and started doing everything by phone, the bureau seemed unnecessary. It went to a house clearance. A good-figured walnut bureau from the 1930s or 40s sells today for between £400 and £1,200. The family that got rid of it got £12. The copper-preserving pan. In most kitchens, hanging on a hook or sitting on a high shelf, there was a large copper pan, not for everyday cooking, for jam, for marmalade, for the annual preserving sessions, when the fruit from the garden or the market was turned into something that would last all winter. Copper conducts heat so evenly that jam made in a copper pan sets more reliably than jam made in anything else. Your grandmother knew this. Her mother knew this. It was simply understood. When supermarket jams became cheap and plentiful, making your own seemed unnecessary. The copper pan came down from its hook and went to the back of a cupboard and eventually to a car boot sale. A large Victorian copper preserving pan in good condition sells today for between £150 and £400. The supermarket strawberry jam costs £1.49. It is nowhere near as good. The telephone table. When the telephone arrived in British homes and in the early 1960s, getting one was still something of an event. It came with a piece of furniture designed specifically for it. The telephone table. A small wooden table with a shelf underneath for the directory, combined with a padded seat beside it. You sat down to make a call. You were comfortable. You had somewhere to put the directory when you needed to look something up. The whole arrangement treated the telephone as an occasion, which it was. When wall-mounted phones arrived, and then cordless phones, and then mobile phones, the telephone table became something you tripped over than haul. Out it went. Original 1950s and 60s telephone tables, with their original seat cushions intact, sell at antiques fairs today for between £150 and £300. We got rid of them because we thought phones were getting more convenient. We were right, but we lost something in the process. The stone hot water bottle. Before the rubber hot water bottle became universal, and alongside it for years after, the stone hot water bottle was in bedrooms across Britain. A stoneware bottle, glazed in cream or brown, with a screw stopper. You filled it from the kettle and wrapped it in a towel and put it in the bed, an hour before you got in. It held heat longer than rubber, significantly longer. A rubber bottle is warm when you get into bed and cold by midnight. A stone bottle was still warm. At 3 in the morning in a bedroom where you could see your breath. When central heating arrived, the stone bottle seemed old-fashioned. It went to the back of the airing cupboard and eventually to a charity shop. Antique stoneware hot water bottles in good condition sell for between £25 and £80 today. They also cannot split, cannot perish, and will outlast any rubber bottle made in the last 50 years. The aspidistra, in the front room or the hallway or the bay window of every other house on the street, there was an aspidistra, a dark green plant with broad flat leaves growing from a large pot, requiring almost no light, almost no water, almost no attention whatsoever. It simply sat there, year after year, decade after decade. The same plant your grandmother had put in that window in 1932 was still alive in 1965. The aspidistra was the working class household's declaration that it had a front room worth having something in, that there was a plant growing and tended and doing well. George Orwell wrote about it. Gracie Fields sang about it. It was the plant of its era. When houseplants became fashionable in the 1970s and people started filling their homes with spider plants and cheese plants and rubber trees, the aspidistra seemed too ordinary, too old. Out it went. They are extremely hard to kill. The one your grandmother had in 1932 was probably still alive when someone finally threw it away. The carpet sweeper. Before the electric vacuum cleaner was in every home, and alongside it for years after, there was the carpet sweeper. Not a vacuum, a mechanical sweeper. A box on wheels with rotating brushes inside that you pushed across the carpet, and it picked up the surface dust, without any electricity, without any noise, and without having to unwind a cable and find a socket. It was for the quick tidy, for the crumbs after breakfast, for between the proper hoovering sessions. You could use it at midnight without waking anyone. You could use it in a room with no socket. You could use it in 30 seconds without getting the vacuum out of the cupboard and assembling it. When vacuum cleaners became lighter and easier, the sweeper seemed unnecessary. The best known was the U-Bank, still made, still sold, still reviewed well by people who try one and wonder why they ever stopped. We have had 60 years of increasingly complicated vacuum cleaners, with filters that need replacing and belts that snap and motors that burn out. U-Bank has a brush. It still works. The deed box. In the cupboard under the stairs, or on the top shelf of the Gore wardrobe, there was the deed box, a rectangular metal tin, usually black, with a carrying handle and a lock. Inside, the documents that mattered, the house deeds, the insurance policies, the birth certificates, the marriage certificate, the will if there was one, or the address of the solicitor who held it. Everything important in one lockable metal box that you could pick up and carry if you had to leave in a hurry. Antique deed boxes sell for many, between £30 and £150. What was inside them is worth considerably more. When people moved to filing cabinets and then to plastic folders and then to the vague modern arrangement of documents being somewhere, possibly scanned, possibly on a computer, possibly in a drawer, the deed box seemed unnecessarily formal. They turn up at house clearances regularly, usually with the lock still intact and the key missing. Inside, the entire documented life of a family, waiting for someone to open it. Antique deed boxes sell between £30 and £150. What was inside them is worth considerably more. The pipe rack. On the mantelpiece, or the small table beside the armchair, there was the pipe rack, a wooden stand with notched slots that held 2 or 3 pipes upright, each one representing a different occasion or mood. The short one for evenings, the longer one for Sundays, the new one still in its pouch at the back. That had been a Christmas present 2 years ago and had never quite felt right. Beside the rack, the tobacco pouch, the pipe tool, a small metal instrument for tamping, reaming and scooping that looked like something a dentist might use. The box of Swan Vestas. What they really hold is the specific smell of a specific evening in a specific room that most people who grew up in the 60s can find again instantly if they come across it. The butler's tray. In the living room or the dining room, there was the butler's tray table, a wooden tray with folding sides that sat on a folding X-shaped stand. You could carry the tray off the stand and into the kitchen to load it and bring it back. You could fold the whole thing flat against the wall when it wasn't needed. It occupied no space and served every purpose a side table needed to serve. Sunday tea appeared on it. Christmas drinks were put on it. The cups and saucers for when the neighbours came round sat on it beside the kitchen door, waiting to be carried through. When fitted furniture and proper side tables became the norm, the butler's tray felt makeshift, improvised. Today it is in every interiors magazine as a versatile living room solution. Antique mahogany butler's trays in good condition sell for between £150 and £400. The one your family had cost nothing. It came with the house or arrived as a wedding present and was simply always there. The wooden clothes era, mounted on the kitchen ceiling or above the range, there was the wooden clothes era, 4 or 5 wooden slats on a rack, suspended from the ceiling on a pulley system. You loaded it with wet washing at floor level, hauled it up to the ceiling where the warm air was, and left it there until the clothes were dry. It used no electricity, it took up no floor space, it used the warmth already in the room from the cooking and the bodies moving through it, and it kept the drying clothes away from everything at floor level. When tumble dryers arrived in the 70s, the ceiling era seemed old-fashioned. The pulleys were taken down, the brackets were plastered over. Today they are sold as a premium kitchen accessory under the name Sheila Made. The original Victorian and Edwardian ones, with their original pulleys and wooden slats, sell at reclamation yards for between £80 and £200. We had one on the ceiling, we plastered over the brackets, the warming shelf, and finally, the one most people never thought about until it was gone. Above the cooker, built into almost every kitchen range and many of the freestanding cookers of the 1960s, there was the warming shelf, a low shelf, usually at eye level when you were standing at the cooker, with just enough heat radiating from the oven below to keep things at exactly the right temperature without cooking them further. Plates went up there before serving so the food didn't go cold the moment you put it on them. Bread went up there to prove before baking. Leftover food went up there to stay warm while the rest of the dinner finished. The warming shelf required no electricity, no timer, no separate setting. The heat from the oven was simply there, and the shelf used it. When eye-level grills replaced ranges and then built-in ovens replaced everything, the warming shelf went with the old cooker. A plate warmer today, doing the same job, electrically with a plug and a dial, costs £40 and sits on the worktop. The warming shelf was part of the cooker. It was simply there, like most of the things in this video, simply there, doing their job, reliably, for decades, until we decided we didn't need them anymore. We were wrong about nearly all of them. 12 things that were in British homes in the 1960s, every single one of them thrown away. Most of them now worth more than when they left. Tell me in the comments which one your family had, which one you wish you had kept. And if you know someone who grew up with any of these in their home, share this with them. Subscribe to Yesterday UK. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.